Hi everyone, I wanted to thank you for attending our seminars hosted by EduBridge. For those that do not know me, my name is Emily Sung, and just a little about my educational background. I grew up in the United States and went to a public high school and then attended MIT, where I graduated with a bachelor's and master's degree in material science and engineering. I want to thank everyone for joining us, and today we would like to discuss the differences between graduating from a private high school versus a public high school and how it affects the admission process. In today's world, below the top level, there is not much difference between public and private high schools in the United States. There are more than 26,000 public high schools and 11,000 private schools in the US. The primary difference across any school is the level of resources that the school has. Smaller high schools may not be able to offer many AP classes or enrichment activities compared to the richer public or private schools. Top public and private high schools also have an advantage in that the admissions departments at the universities get to know the guidance counselors at the top schools, and over the years are able to tell which are the top students because they know what level of academics and activities come from the individual school. Also, because of the relationships with the guidance counselors, if the university receives a strong recommendation from a particular counselor that they know, it will be more helpful than from someone that they have no relationship with. Top private schools such as Phillips Exeter, Andover, and Deerfield regularly send many students to Ivy League universities each year. Similarly, top public schools, such as Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology, will send equally many students to the Ivy League each year. Personally, we believe that it's more important to go to a top high school and less important whether the school is public or private. It's true, however, that the resources available at the top private schools will be much better than the resources at the top public schools. For example, at a school like Harker, which is based in Silicon Valley, the teachers will send out lists of research opportunities for students to apply to over the summer. Whereas next door at Monte Vista High School, which is a top public school, students will need to find these opportunities for themselves and make resources on their own. So if you have a driven, self-starter student, they will always find a way, so it will not make much difference to such an individual whether they go to a public or a private high school. But a student who is not as driven would benefit more from the resources that a private school has to offer. So the big question is, how do I decide which type of school is best for my child? As parents, you know your child better than anybody else in the world. Some teens may benefit from being around a private school peer group who are almost universally serious about academics, whereas other students will have no trouble thriving academically in a public school environment where not every student may be quite as focused. So if your teen is unmotivated and floundering at a public school, a private high school may be a better choice. If your teen is a self-starter and possesses a reasonable level of maturity, a public school might be the perfect place for them to stand out and excel. We recently reached out to the admissions department at Stanford and asked them if coming from a top private school would prepare a student better than a student from a public school. And they responded that what really makes a student stand out from another student is their extracurricular story, their ability to articulate themselves, and the baseline of test scores. What it really boils down to is that a lot of students can take many activities and classes with no real understanding of why they are choosing a particular course or activity other than the fact that it looks good on their resume. The admissions department really wants a cohesive story and a student that is really driven and motivated to pursue their area of interest, whatever it may be. So we always believe that you have to focus on each individual student and their interests, and the school, whether private or public, does not matter as much. The bottom line is that a private school may offer more resources and activities for their students than a public school, but what really makes a student stand out to the admissions committee is if they excel or show strength in a particular area and can demonstrate through classes and activities and interviews how focused and driven in this area that they are. It's true that private schools have a slightly higher acceptance rate at the Ivy League colleges, but this is really because they have more resources at their disposal, and also they can better prepare their students in the application process. Other studies have found that the slightly higher acceptance rate for private schools versus public schools is not statistically relevant. So although a private school may show a slightly higher acceptance rate into top Ivy League schools, this really is a negligible amount compared to top public high schools. Again, we believe that it's really much more important to focus on the individual strengths of each student and try to create a story and make the student more personable, and that way they will stand out in the admissions process. So this kind of concludes our discussion on private versus public high schools. And I would like to invite anybody who has any questions, you can ask me now and I'll try my best to answer them. Thank you. Hi, so we had a question on whether it's you're able to apply for a US medical school without a US green card. And the short answer is that yes, it is possible, but it's harder because US medical schools accept only a small number of international applicants into their programs. The second question was that if a student isn't a US citizen, can that student go to a public high school? And yes, it is acceptable for an international student to go to a US high school as long as they have a valid visa to live in the United States. What high school you attend is based on geographic boundaries on where you live. The second part of the question was whether or not it's better to go to which has higher acceptance rate between a public and a private school. And it really depends on what high school you go to. Just like there's good and bad public high schools, there are also good and bad private schools. So you really want to focus on going to a top high school, whether or not it's private or public. The last question was whether or not it is a good idea to have a child repeat a grade. And this is a topic that we're going to discuss in more detail in a few days at another seminar. But the short answer is that in high school, you never want to have a child repeat a grade. If you want to do that, you should do that more in the elementary school level. There are pros and cons to, in America, we call this the redshirting process. And there are pros and cons to this, and we'll discuss that in more detail at a later seminar. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today, and we hope to see you tomorrow when we're discussing about how to choose your volunteer work and how it impacts college admissions. Thank you so much. Bye.